Snow fell gently over Pinecrest, blanketing the streets in a soft white layer that sparkled under the glow of string lights. It was the night of the annual winter festival, and the entire town had come together to celebrate. Children laughed as they chased each other through the snow, their cheeks rosy from the cold. Parents sipped hot chocolate while admiring the intricate ice sculptures displayed along Main Street. For most residents, it was a time of joy, a chance to escape the monotony of daily life and embrace the magic of the season. 16-year-old Lily Harper stood near the skating rink, her breath visible in the frosty air. She pulled her red scarf tighter around her neck and smiled as she watched her friends glide across the ice. Her older brother, Jake, had promised to pick her up by 9 o'clock, but she wasn't ready to leave just yet. There was something special about this year's festival, the way the lights shimmered against the snow, the smell of roasted chestnuts wafting through the air, and the sound of carolers singing cheerful melodies. It all felt like a dream. Lily turned to her best friend Emma, who was trying to coax her onto the ice. "Come on, Lily. You can't spend the whole night standing here," Emma teased, waving her gloved hand toward the rink. "I'm fine right here," Lily replied with a laugh. "Besides, you know I'm terrible at skating." Emma rolled her eyes playfully. "That's because you never try. Come on, it'll be fun." Before Lily could respond, a loud cheer erupted from the crowd gathered near the Ferris wheel. Fireworks burst overhead, painting the sky in vibrant colors. Everyone paused to watch the spectacle, their faces illuminated by bursts of red, green, and gold. Lily tilted her head back, marveling at how beautiful it looked against the starry night. As the fireworks faded, Lily noticed someone standing at the edge of the crowd. He wore a long, dark coat that seemed out of place among the bright festival attire. His face was partially hidden beneath the brim of his hat, but there was something unsettling about the way he stared directly at her. She shifted uncomfortably, glancing away for a moment before looking back. When she did, he was gone. "Did you see that guy?" Lily asked Emma, pointing toward where the man had been standing. Emma followed her gaze but shrugged. "What guy? I didn't see anyone." "It doesn't matter," Lily said quickly, shaking off the strange feeling. "Let's go get some hot cocoa." The two girls wandered over to a food stall, joining the line of people waiting to order. As they chatted about school and plans for the upcoming holidays, Lily couldn't shake the image of the mysterious man from her mind. Something about him felt wrong, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Maybe it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. After all, it was easy to feel spooked when surrounded by so many unfamiliar faces. By 8:30, Lily decided it was time to meet Jake. She hugged Emma goodbye and made her way toward the parking lot where he was supposed to pick her up. The streets were quieter now, the crowds thinning as families headed home. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she walked past rows of decorated shops, their windows glowing warmly despite the chill in the air. When she reached the parking lot, however, Jake's car was nowhere to be seen. Frowning, Lily checked her phone. No messages. She sighed and leaned against a lamppost, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. The temperature had dropped significantly and the wind cut through her coat like knives. She considered calling Jake, but hesitated, not wanting to seem impatient. Minutes ticked by and still no sign of him. Just as Lily was about to dial his number, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning quickly, she saw the man in the dark coat again. This time, he was closer, close enough for her to make out his sharp features and piercing eyes. Her heart raced as he took a step forward. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. "No," Lily replied, taking a step back. "I'm waiting for my brother." The man nodded, but his expression remained unreadable. "It's getting late. You shouldn't be out here alone." Before Lily could respond, headlights appeared in the distance, breaking the tension. Relief washed over her as Jake's car pulled into the lot. Without another word, she hurried toward him, glancing back only once to see the man watching her from the shadows. "What took you so long?" Lily asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. "Sorry, traffic was bad," Jake said, pulling away from the curb. "Why do you look so freaked out?" Lily hesitated, unsure if she should mention the man. There was just someone weird hanging around, but it's probably nothing. Jake frowned. Weird how? She shook her head. Never mind, let's just go home. Neither of them realized it then, but those would be the last words Lily spoke to her brother for weeks. The next morning, panic swept through Pinecrest when Lily failed to return home. Her parents called the police, and soon the entire town was searching for her. Flyers with her picture were posted everywhere, urging anyone with information to come forward. Volunteers combed the festival grounds, the woods, and even nearby towns, but there was no trace of her. Detectives interviewed everyone who had been at the festival that night, piecing together fragments of what might have happened. One witness claimed to have seen Lily talking to a man in a dark coat near the skating rink, but descriptions were vague, and no one could identify him. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed glimpses of her walking alone, but nothing definitive. As days passed, hope began to fade. The once bustling streets of Pinecrest grew eerily quiet, the joy of the festival replaced by a heavy sense of dread. Rumors spread among the townsfolk, ranging from theories of abduction to wild speculation about supernatural forces. Whatever had happened to Lily, it was clear that Pinecrest would never be the same again. For Jake, the guilt was unbearable. He replayed every detail of that night in his mind, wondering if he could have done something differently. If only he'd arrived sooner. If only he'd paid more attention to Lily's concerns. But dwelling on what-ifs wouldn't bring her back. All he could do now was wait and pray for answers. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, the truth lay hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Detective Laura Myers sat alone in her office late at night, the hum of the fluorescent lights above her blending with the distant sound of snow tapping against the windows. She had been working non-stop since Lily Harper disappeared, but the case was going nowhere. Every lead seemed to fizzle out before it even began, leaving her frustrated and exhausted. Her desk was cluttered with notes, photos, and maps marked with red circles around areas that had already been searched. Yet none of it brought them any closer to finding Lily. Just as Laura leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples, the door creaked open slightly. A young officer poked his head inside. "Detective, someone dropped this off for you," he said, holding up a small USB drive wrapped in plain white paper. Laura frowned. "Who brought it?" He didn't say, just handed it to the front desk and left. She took the drive cautiously, examining the package. There was no note, no name, nothing to indicate who might have sent it or why. Still, something about it felt significant. Setting it down on her desk, she plugged it into her laptop and waited for the files to load. When the screen finally flickered to life, there was only one file, a video labeled Pinecrest. Her heart pounded as she clicked play. The footage was shaky and poorly lit, but it didn't take long to recognize the figure sitting in the center of the frame. It was Lily Harper. Her usually bright eyes were wide with fear, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "They're here," Lily whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I don't know what they want, but the shadows, they move on their own." The camera cut to static abruptly, leaving Laura staring at the blank screen. She rewound the video and played it again, hoping to catch more details. But no matter how many times she watched it, the message remained cryptic. What did Lily mean by they? And where had the video been recorded? Laura immediately called Jake Harper, Lily's older brother, to share the discovery. He arrived, within minutes his face pale and drawn from weeks of worry. As they sat together in the quiet office, Laura replayed the video for him. Jake's hands clenched into fists as he listened to his sister's voice. "We need to find her," Jake said through gritted teeth. "Wherever she is, we can't give up." "I agree," Laura replied firmly. "But first, we need to figure out where this was filmed. Look closely. Does anything look familiar?" Jake squinted at the screen, studying the background. Behind Lily, there was a concrete wall covered in peeling paint, and faint outlines of graffiti could be seen in the dim light. "That looks like an old warehouse," he said after a moment. There are a few abandoned ones on the outskirts of town. Laura nodded. Good. We'll start there tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I'll see if I can trace the metadata of this video to pinpoint its origin. As Jake left the station, Laura stayed behind, determined to dig deeper into the mystery. She ran the USB drive through forensic software, searching for any clues embedded in the file. To her disappointment, the results came back inconclusive. The video had been stripped of identifying information, likely done intentionally to obscure its source. Whoever had sent it didn't want to be found. Despite the dead end, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the video was meant to send a message, not just to her, but to the entire town. She printed out screenshots of the footage and pinned them to the bulletin board in her office alongside other evidence related to Lily's disappearance. Something about the setting felt eerily familiar, though she couldn't quite place it. The next day, rumors about the video spread quickly through Pinecrest. Word got out that the police had received new evidence, and soon everyone was talking about what it might mean. Some believed it was proof that Lily was still alive, while others thought it was a cruel prank designed to torment her family. Among the whispers, however, were darker theories, that the Winter Festival itself was cursed. Laura dismissed these superstitions at first, chalking them up to people's fear and imagination running wild. But as she continued investigating, she began hearing stories from longtime residents about strange occurrences tied to the festival site. One elderly woman claimed her niece had vanished during the festival 20 years ago, leaving behind only a single shoe near the skating rink. Another man recalled seeing shadowy figures lurking in the woods late at night, their movements too fluid to be human. Intrigued, Laura decided to visit some of the families affected by past disappearances. Her first stop was the home of Mrs. Peterson, whose daughter Sarah had gone missing 15 years earlier under similar circumstances. The house was modest, decorated with photographs of happier times. Mrs. Peterson greeted Laura with watery eyes, clutching a worn photo album to her chest. She talked about seeing someone following her, Mrs. Peterson explained, flipping through the pages until she found a picture of Sarah smiling brightly at the camera. A man in a dark coat always watching. I thought she was imagining things, but now... Laura jotted down the details, feeling a chill run down her spine. The description matched the witness accounts from Lily's case. Could there really be a connection between the two disappearances? Before leaving, Mrs. Peterson handed Laura a small sketchbook belonging to Sarah. Inside were drawings of tall, gaunt figures with elongated limbs and hollow eyes. They looked almost alien, yet terrifyingly real. Laura thanked her and promised to keep her updated on the investigation. Back at the station, Laura showed the sketches to Jake, who had returned to check on any progress. His face turned pale as he flipped through the pages. These are the same shapes I've seen in my dreams, he admitted quietly. Ever since Lily disappeared, I keep dreaming about them standing in the woods, watching me. Laura studied him carefully. Was it possible that Jake was onto something, or was the stress of the situation playing tricks on his mind? Either way, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a pattern, one that pointed toward something far more sinister than anyone had imagined. Over the next few days, Laura worked tirelessly to piece together the timeline of events leading up to Lily's disappearance. She revisited the festival site, paying close attention to the skating rink and surrounding areas. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but upon closer inspection, she noticed faint markings etched into the ice, a series of symbols that resembled those in Sarah's sketchbook. It wasn't until she consulted an expert in ancient languages that the truth began to unravel. The symbols weren't random. They were part of a ritualistic language used in occult practices. According to the expert, whoever had carved them into the ice was attempting to summon something, or someone, from another realm. Laura shared her findings with Jake, who listened intently despite the growing dread in his chest. "So you're saying this isn't just a kidnapping?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is something else entirely?" "I don't know what to call it yet," Laura admitted. "But whatever it is, it's bigger than both of us." and we need to be careful moving forward. As they prepared to search the suspected warehouses on the outskirts of town, neither Laura nor Jake could have predicted what awaited them. The answers they sought were closer than they realized, but so were the dangers lurking in the shadows. Jake Harper couldn't sleep. The images from Sarah's sketchbook haunted him. Those tall, gaunt figures with hollow eyes seemed to follow him everywhere he went, even when he closed his own. He knew he wasn't imagining things. There was something unnatural about Lily's disappearance, something beyond human understanding. And now, with Detective Laura Myers uncovering more clues, the pieces were starting to fit together in ways that terrified him. The next morning, Jake met Laura outside the police station. She carried a map marked with red circles indicating the locations of several abandoned warehouses on the outskirts of Pinecrest. "We'll start with the one closest to the festival site," she said, handing him a flashlight. "If we find anything suspicious, we call for backup immediately." Jake nodded, though deep down he felt uneasy. Something about this whole situation didn't sit right. As they drove toward the first warehouse, the snow-covered landscape grew quieter, the cheerful hum of the town fading behind them. The road became rougher, flanked by dense pine trees whose branches clawed at the sky. It felt like they were entering another world entirely. When they arrived at the first warehouse, it looked exactly as Jake had imagined: decrepit, isolated, and unwelcoming. Its windows were boarded up, and the metal roof groaned under the weight of accumulated snow. Laura pulled out her gun, motioning for Jake to stay close as they approached the entrance. The heavy door creaked open with a loud screech, revealing a dimly lit interior filled with shadows. Inside, the air was icy, colder than it should have been given the mild winter outside. Broken furniture and piles of debris littered the floor, making navigation difficult. Laura swept her flashlight across the space, illuminating graffiti-covered walls and strange symbols carved into the concrete. Some of the markings matched those Laura had seen at the festival site. "This is it," she whispered, her voice tight with tension. "Whoever brought Lily here must have used these symbols during some kind of ritual." Jake swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room. He couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Every step echoed loudly in the silence, and the faint sound of whispering seemed to drift through the air. At first he thought it was just the wind, but the whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if coming from all directions at once. "Todd, you hear that?" Jake asked, gripping the flashlight tightly. Laura nodded, her expression grim. "Stay focused. We need to find proof before we leave." They moved deeper into the warehouse, following the trail of symbols etched into the floor. The further they went, the stronger the sense of unease became. The temperature dropped even lower, and their breaths turned into visible clouds. Finally, they reached a large open area where an altar stood in the center, surrounded by melted candles and remnants of incense. On the ground around the altar were fresh chalk markings identical to those in Sarah's sketchbook. Jake froze, staring at the setup. This is where they took her," he murmured, his voice trembling. "But why? What did they want? With Lily?" Laura knelt beside the altar, examining the items scattered around it: a rusted knife, a black feather, and what appeared to be strands of hair wrapped in twine. "It looks like some kind of offering," she said, her tone cautious. "Whoever did this was trying to summon something." Summon something. Jake's mind raced. Was this why people talked about curses? Was Pinecrest truly dealing with forces beyond comprehension? Before he could ask more questions, a sudden gust of wind slammed shut the door they had entered through, plunging the room into near darkness. Both of them spun around, flashlights sweeping wildly across the space. "Stay calm," Laura instructed, though her voice betrayed her own fear. "We're not alone here." As if on cue, the shadows along the walls began to shift unnaturally, stretching and twisting as if alive. Jake backed away instinctively, bumping into the altar. A sharp pain shot through his hand as he accidentally knocked over one of the candles. The flame sputtered but didn't go out, casting flickering light onto the wall behind him. That's when he saw them, the figures, tall and skeletal with elongated limbs and empty eye sockets that glowed faintly. They emerged from the darkness like wraiths. They didn't move like humans, their motions were jerky, unnatural, as if controlled by strings. Jake grabbed Laura's arm, pointing wordlessly at the horrifying sight. "What are they?" Laura whispered, raising her gun despite knowing bullets wouldn't stop whatever these things were. "I don't know," Jake replied, his voice barely audible. "But I think they're what Lily warned us about." The figures didn't attack. Instead, they lingered at the edges of the light, watching, silently, as if waiting for something or someone to give them permission to act. Jake and Laura exchanged a glance, both realizing they needed to leave immediately. Slowly, they began backing toward the exit, keeping their lights trained on the creatures. Just as they reached the door, the whispers returned, louder this time. Words formed amidst the chaos, unintelligible yet menacing. Jake fumbled with the handle, his hands shaking too much to turn it properly. Laura stepped in, yanking the door open and ushering him outside. They ran to the car, slamming the doors shut behind them. Neither spoke as Laura sped away from the warehouse, leaving the nightmare behind. For now. Jake stared out the window, his heart pounding in his chest. Whatever those things were, they weren't done with Pinecrest. And if they found Lily, there was no telling what might happen next. Back at the station, Laura uploaded photos of the symbols and artifacts they had discovered to a database, hoping to find connections to similar cases elsewhere. Meanwhile, Jake pored over Sarah's sketchbook again, searching for answers. One page caught his attention. A note scribbled in the corner read, "Shadow Man leads them." "Laura," Jake said suddenly, holding up the book. "What if there's someone controlling these things? Someone who calls himself the Shadow Man?" Laura frowned, considering the possibility. If that's true, then finding him might be the key to saving Lily and stopping whatever's happening in Pinecrest. With renewed determination, they decided to dig deeper into the town's history. If the Shadow Man existed, he had likely left traces of his presence long before Lily's disappearance. Their search would take them to places they never imagined and force them to confront truths darker than they could have anticipated. Jake Harper and Detective Laura Myers spent hours combing through archives, libraries, and old records, searching for any mention of the Shadow Man or similar disappearances linked to Pinecrest. They knew time was running out. If Lily was still alive, they needed to act fast. But the deeper they dug, the more complex the mystery became. Their first stop was the Pinecrest Historical Society, housed in a creaky old building on the edge of town. Inside, rows of shelves sagged under the weight of decades-old newspapers, photo albums, and ledgers. An elderly volunteer named Mrs. Adler greeted them warmly, her sharp eyes betraying curiosity about their sudden interest in local history. "We're looking for information about past disappearances," Jake explained. "Anything unusual that might connect to the Winter Festival?" Mrs. Adler nodded knowingly, leading them to a cluttered corner of the room. "You wouldn't believe how many stories I've heard over the years," she said, pulling down a dusty box labeled Unsolved Cases. "Some folks say the festival site has been cursed since the early 1900s. Disappearances, strange sightings, it's all here somewhere." Laura thanked her and began sorting through the contents of the box. Among the faded clippings and brittle pages, they found reports of several incidents dating back decades. Each case shared eerie similarities, victims vanishing without explanation, followed by cryptic messages or rumors of shadowy figures seen near the festival site. One article stood out, a story from the 1950s about a teenage boy who disappeared after claiming he'd been followed home by a man in black during the festival. His body was never found, but months later, townsfolk reported seeing ghostly apparitions near the woods where he was last seen. "This can't just be coincidence," Laura muttered, jotting down notes. "There's definitely a pattern here." As they continued their search, Jake stumbled upon a handwritten journal tucked inside one of the folders. Its cover was worn, and the pages smelled faintly of mildew. Flipping it open, he discovered entries written by someone named Henry Grayson, a former resident of Pinecrest. The final entry caught his attention. "The Shadow Man came again tonight. He says the sacrifices must continue if we want to keep the darkness at bay. I don't know how much longer I can live with this burden." Jake's stomach churned as he read the words aloud to Laura. Sacrifices? What does that even mean? It means someone in this town has been using innocent people to feed whatever evil they think they're controlling. Laura replied grimly. If this Henry Grayson knew about it, maybe his family does too. Determined to learn more, they tracked down the Graysons' descendants, eventually arriving at the home of Mr. Daniel Grayson, a reclusive man in his 60s who lived alone on the outskirts of town. His house was modest but well kept, surrounded by tall trees that blocked most of the sunlight. When they knocked on the door, he answered cautiously, his piercing blue eyes studying them warily. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone clipped. "We're investigating recent disappearances tied to the Winter Festival," Laura explained, showing him her badge. "We understand your family may have knowledge about certain traditions associated with the event." Daniel hesitated before stepping aside to let them in. The interior of the house was dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn across the windows. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes on folklore, mythology, and occult practices. Sitting down at the kitchen table, Daniel sighed deeply as, if bracing himself for what he was about to reveal. "My grandfather started it," he admitted quietly. "He believed he could protect the town by making deals with entities. He thought offering sacrifices would keep the shadows away. Over the years, others joined him, forming a secret society within Pinecrest." Jake leaned forward, his voice shaking. "And Lily? Was she chosen as some kind of sacrifice?" Daniel nodded reluctantly. "I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't. Listen, they said it was necessary to maintain the balance. I didn't agree, but there's only so much I can do against people who've believed in this nonsense for generations." Laura pressed him for details. "Where are these rituals performed? Where is Lily now?" "They use the old warehouses outside of town," Daniel replied. "But you need to be careful. These things, they're not human. If you provoke them, they'll retaliate." With Daniel's warning ringing in their ears, Jake and Laura prepared to return to the warehouse they had visited earlier. This time, however, they planned to go fully equipped, with backup, weapons, and a clear strategy. As they gathered supplies, Jake couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and determination. He knew the risks involved, but giving up wasn't an option, not when Lily's life hung in the balance. That night, as they drove toward the warehouse, the snow-covered landscape felt eerier than ever. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty fields. Jake glanced at Laura, noticing the tension etched into her face. "Do you really think we can stop this?" he asked softly. "I don't know," she admitted. "But we have to try." When they arrived, the warehouse loomed ahead like a silent predator, its boarded-up windows reflecting the pale light of the stars. Armed officers surrounded the perimeter while Jake and Laura entered cautiously, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air inside was colder than before, and the whispers seemed louder, almost taunting. They made their way to the altar, where fresh candles burned brightly despite the lack of wind. Symbols glowed faintly on the floor, pulsating with an unnatural energy. And then, in the corner of the room, they saw it, a camcorder resting atop a pile of debris. Laura picked it up carefully, pressing play. The screen flickered to life, revealing another video of Lily. This time her voice was weaker, her face paler. She spoke haltingly, her words barely audible over the sound of distant chanting. "They're coming for me," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please hurry." Before the video ended, the camera panned briefly to show the shadowy figures standing just beyond the frame. Their hollow eyes stared directly into the lens, sending chills down Jake's spine. "We're too late," he whispered, his voice breaking. "No," Laura said firmly, gripping his shoulder. "We're not leaving until we find her." With renewed resolve, they searched every inch of the warehouse, calling out Lily's name. But the deeper they ventured, the stronger the presence of the shadows became. It was as if the warehouse itself was alive, shifting and twisting around them. Just as they reached a dead end, a low growl echoed through the corridor. Turning slowly, they saw the figures emerging from the darkness, taller and more menacing than before. Jake raised his flashlight, the beam trembling as it illuminated their elongated forms. For a moment, everything froze. The humans and the creatures locked in a silent standoff. Then, from somewhere deep within the warehouse, a faint cry pierced the silence. The cry echoed again, louder this time, snapping Jake and Laura out of their frozen state. "Lily!" Jake shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. He bolted forward, ignoring Laura's urgent warning to stay cautious. The shadowy figures loomed closer, their movements jerky and unnatural. But Jake didn't care. He could hear his sister calling for help, and nothing else mattered. Laura followed closely behind, her flashlight sweeping across the corridor as they ran deeper into the warehouse. The temperature dropped sharply, and their breaths turned into visible clouds. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, filling the air with incomprehensible murmurs that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Despite the chaos, one thing was clear. Lily was nearby. They reached a set of rickety stairs leading downward, the wood groaning under their weight as they descended. At the bottom, they found themselves in a large open space lit only by the flickering glow of candles arranged in a perfect circle on the floor. In the center of the circle stood Lily, her face pale but alive, her red scarf still wrapped tightly around her neck. Her hands were tied loosely with rope, and she looked up at them with relief in her tear-filled eyes. "Jake," she cried, her voice trembling. "You came." Before either of them could respond, the shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, surrounding the circle. They moved silently, their hollow eyes glowing faintly as they watched the intruders with unsettling intensity. Jake instinctively stepped in front of Lily, shielding her with his body while Laura raised her flashlight, its beam causing the creatures to flinch slightly. "We need to break the circle," Laura whispered urgently. "It's keeping her trapped." Jake nodded, scanning the room for anything he could use to disrupt the ritual. His eyes landed on a rusted metal pipe lying near the edge of the circle. Grabbing it, he swung hard at the nearest candle, knocking it over and extinguishing its flame. The moment the light went out, the shadows recoiled violently, emitting ear-piercing screeches that echoed through the chamber. Laura joined him, kicking over another candle as the creatures lunged toward them. Their elongated arms swiped at the air, narrowly missing Jake as he ducked and rolled out of the way. Together they worked quickly, destroying the remaining candles until the circle was broken. As the last flame flickered and died, the shadows collapsed inward, dissolving into thin wisps of smoke that vanished into the darkness. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Then Lily stumbled forward, free from whatever force had been, holding her captive. Jake caught her in his arms, pulling her close as tears streamed down both their faces. "I thought I'd never see you again," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "It's okay now," Lily whispered, clutching him tightly. "You saved me." But Laura wasn't ready to celebrate just yet. She kept her flashlight trained on the corners of the room, searching for any sign of movement. "We're not safe yet," she warned. "We need to get out of here now." As they made their way back toward the stairs, a low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the walls groaned ominously. The warehouse itself seemed to be reacting to the disruption of the ritual, threatening to collapse around them. "Move faster," Laura urged, pushing them ahead of her. They climbed the stairs two at a time, emerging into the main part of the warehouse just as the structure began to crumble behind them. Beams splintered and chunks of concrete tumbled to the floor, forcing them to run even harder. Reaching the exit, they burst outside into the cold night air, gasping for breath as the building collapsed entirely in a cloud of dust and debris. Officers stationed outside rushed to meet them, guiding them to safety. Back at the station, Lily recounted everything she had endured during her captivity. She described being taken to the warehouse by the Shadow Man, a man in a dark coat who had approached her near the skating rink and forced to participate in the ritual. "He said it was to protect the town," Lily explained, her voice shaky. "But I didn't understand what he meant." Laura listened intently, piecing together the final details of the case. With Daniel Grayson's confession and the evidence, Gathered from the warehouse, she knew they finally had enough to bring down the secret society responsible for these horrors. Arrest warrants were issued for everyone involved, including the enigmatic Shadow Man. In the days that followed, Pinecrest slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such an ordeal. The festival site was closed indefinitely, and rumors of curses faded as people tried to move on with their lives. For Jake and Lily, however, nothing would ever be the same. The memories of those shadowy figures lingered, haunting their dreams and reminding them of how close they had come to losing each other forever. One evening, as Jake sat alone in his bedroom, he noticed something strange tucked beneath his pillow. It was a single black feather, identical to the one Laura had found at the altar. His blood ran cold as he stared at it, realizing that perhaps the shadows weren't entirely gone after all. Unbeknownst to anyone, deep within the ruins of the warehouse, a faint blue light began to pulse from the ground where the ritual had taken place. The symbols carved into the floor glowed softly, as if waiting patiently for the next opportunity to awaken. Whatever force had been summoned hadn't been destroyed. It had merely retreated, biding its time until it could strike again. The black feather under Jake's pillow weighed heavily on his mind. It wasn't just a random object, it was a message, a reminder that whatever evil had been unleashed hadn't truly disappeared. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were still in danger, no matter how much everyone else wanted to believe otherwise. Pinecrest might have returned to its quiet routines, but Jake knew better. The shadows were patient, and so was the Shadow Man. Determined to uncover the full truth, Jake went straight to Detective Laura Myers. Together, they decided to confront Daniel Grayson again. This time, they wouldn't settle for vague answers. They needed names, details, and proof to ensure the society behind these horrors could never operate again. When they arrived at Daniel's house, he seemed unsurprised to see them, almost as if he'd been expecting their visit. "You're not done yet, are you?" Daniel asked, gesturing for them to sit. His voice carried a mix of resignation and guilt. "No, we're not," Jake replied firmly. "You told us about your grandfather, starting this tradition, but who leads it now? Who calls himself the Shadow Man?" Daniel hesitated, his eyes darting toward the bookshelf behind him. Finally, he sighed and reached for an old leather-bound journal. "This belonged to my father," he said, handing it to Laura. "It's all here, the rituals, the sacrifices, and the identity of the current leader." Laura flipped through the pages carefully, her brow furrowing as she read. The handwriting was shaky but legible, detailing decades of ceremonies meant to appease the entities summoned by Henry Grayson. At the end, a name stood out: Mr. Edward Caldwell, a wealthy businessman and longtime resident of Pinecrest. "Caldwell?" Jake exclaimed, stunned. "He's one of the most respected people in town. That's why he got away with it for so long," Daniel admitted bitterly. "No one questioned someone like him. He convinced everyone that what he was doing was necessary to protect Pinecrest. My family tried to distance ourselves from it years ago, but some traditions die hard." Armed with this information, Laura wasted no time obtaining a warrant to search Caldwell's home. That evening, accompanied by officers, they arrived at his sprawling estate on the outskirts of town. The mansion was imposing, with towering windows and manicured gardens blanketed in fresh snow. Everything about it screamed wealth and power. But beneath the surface lay something far darker. When they knocked on the door, Caldwell answered calmly, dressed in a tailored suit despite the late hour. His piercing gray eyes betrayed no fear as he invited them inside. "Detective Myers," he greeted smoothly. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "We know what you've been doing," Laura stated bluntly, holding up the journal. "Your little traditions have caused enough harm already." For a brief moment, Caldwell's composure faltered. Then with a chilling smile, he shrugged. "You think exposing me will stop any of this? Do you really believe destroying the warehouse ended it? Those entities aren't gone. They're waiting, and without someone managing them, they'll consume this entire town." Jake stepped forward, anger boiling inside him. "You used innocent people as sacrifices. You took my sister. How can you justify that?" Caldwell's expression hardened. I did what was necessary to keep Pinecrest safe. Your sister was chosen because she fit the criteria. Sacrifices must be made to maintain balance. Without me, there would be chaos. Laura cut in sharply. Enough. You're under arrest. As officers led Caldwell away, Jake noticed a strange symbol carved into the mantelpiece above the fireplace. It matched the ones they'd seen at the warehouse. What does this mean? He demanded, pointing at it. Caldwell glanced back, smirking. That's their mark. They'll find you when the time comes. There's no escaping them. The warning sent chills down Jake's spine, but he refused to let fear take over. Back at the station, Laura worked tirelessly to dismantle the remnants of the secret society, rounding up anyone connected to the rituals. With Caldwell behind bars, the town began to breathe easier, though whispers of curses persisted among the superstitious. In the weeks that followed, Jake and Lily tried to rebuild their lives. They spent more time together, cherishing every moment, as if it might be their last. Yet the shadowy figures continued to haunt Jake's dreams, their hollow eyes staring accusingly at him. One night, unable to sleep, he wandered into the attic and found an old box belonging to their late grandfather. Inside was a sketchbook filled with drawings eerily similar to Sarah's, tall, gaunt figures with elongated limbs. Lily joined him, gasping as she flipped through the pages. "Grandpa drew these?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I guess he knew something about what's been happening," Jake murmured. "Maybe he was trying to warn us." At the bottom of the box, they discovered a letter addressed to whoever finds this. In careful handwriting, their grandfather explained that he had once been part of the secret society, but left after realizing the true cost of their actions. He urged whoever read the letter to destroy the artifacts tied to the rituals, warning that keeping even one piece intact could allow the entities to return. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jake and Laura organized a team to scour the ruins of the warehouse. They gathered every remaining artifact, the rusted knife, the black feathers, the chalk markings, and burned them in a controlled fire outside of town. As the flames consumed the cursed objects, the air grew unnaturally still, and for a fleeting moment Jake thought he heard a faint whisper fade into silence. Though the immediate threat seemed neutralized, Jake couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease. He knew the shadows weren't entirely gone, they were merely biding their time. For now, however, Pinecrest could rest easy, its residents blissfully unaware of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of their understanding. As winter gave way to spring, Jake visited the festival site one last time. The once bright decorations were gone, replaced by overgrown grass and fading memories. Standing near the skating rink, he lit a candle in Lily's honor, thanking her for surviving and vowing to protect their town from whatever might come next. In the distance, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest trace of a whisper. Jake turned quickly, but there was nothing there, only the endless expanse of snow-covered fields stretching toward the horizon. Shaking off the chill, he walked away, determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Pinecrest had survived its darkest chapter, but deep within the woods the ground shifted slightly, revealing the faint outline of a glowing symbol buried beneath the earth. The shadows were patient, and they would wait as long as it took to rise again.